Let me describe a bow hunting scenario for you. There's a lone veteran bow hunter high on a mountain ridge with a trophy ram bedded below him. He waits for this ram to rise from his bed so that he can make a perfect shot. And when that old ram finally gets up and turns broadside, the bow hunter goes to full draw. He's calm. His bow arm does not shake. His mind is perfectly still. He looses the arrow, sees it arc in slow motion, and then watches it disappear behind the ram's shoulder. This is just how it's supposed to happen. But now, let me share with you a bow hunting reality. This is not how it happens in real life. Even the best, most experienced bow hunters feel that rush of nervousness, anxiety, and self-doubt when a shot finally presents itself. I'm Editor-in-Chief Alex Robinson, and today I'm sitting down with Jace Bauserman, a longtime Western bow hunter. It took Jace 19 years, to draw a Colorado bighorn archery sheep tag. And then when he finally did, he got to shooting his bow meticulously. He worked on his gear, he worked on his form, did all that good stuff. But more than anything, Jace worked on his mental game. Because Jace is an anxious guy by nature, and he knew that he'd only get one shot at this. Here's why Jace loves bow hunting so much, and also how he made the biggest archery shot of his life. Okay, Jace, before we get into the hunt itself, just tell me how you got into bow hunting. How did you get started in this?
A guy by the name of Ralph Zimmerman who lives in my hometown here is just a well-known bow hunter in the area. And I hooked up with him and started shooting a bow. And honestly, from that point, it was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. I mean, I was just totally intrigued with the whole process, all the gear, all the work it took, how perfect you had to be, how disciplined you had to be to make a really good shot. And then I fell in love with building arrows and tuning and tinkering, setting up my own equipment and things like that. And before I knew it, I was just kind of off and rolling. I was hunting anything I could with my bow, everything, of course, in Colorado at that point, because I just didn't have the funds or to have any gear, let alone apply for out-of-state tags. So that's just kind of how I got into it, man. And it's been full bore ever since.
What is it about this bighorn sheep hunt that's different than anything you've done before?
As a Western hunter and growing up in the West, sheep tags just always kind of the pinnacle, right? I mean, for most guys, you talk to them, and of course, elk is everybody wants to come hunt elk out west, and you can. That's the cool thing. I mean, in most states like Colorado, you buy an over-the-counter tag and you can come hunt elk on public land, no problem. Sheep's different. I got to look at them my whole life. I'd see them while I was elk hunting. I would see them on family vacations. I would see them up in the high country fly fishing, and they're just such a regal animal, from their color to their attitude to how they interact with each other. I mean, a band of rams is like watching, I'm a high school football coach, and it's like watching a bunch of 14 and 15-year-old boys jack around in a locker room is what a band of rams reminds me of, man. I mean, they'll get together and they'll stay together, and one minute they're all bedded on a rock face looking like buddies, and then the next minute one ram will decide to walk up and just put his horns square in the middle of another ram's butt and push him around, and then they'll run and kick and buck. And if you watch them long enough, and I mean, this is part of it. I mean, you'll watch a ram walk up behind another ram and just lift his front leg and just kick a ram square in the nuts. I mean, it's just really comical to watch. And then 15 minutes later, they're bedded together and they're licking on one another's horns, and they're just a really, really interesting animal. And I think another big draw to them is you don't get to hunt them every day. Yeah. You spend years dreaming and thinking about the day that maybe your number will get called. Maybe you'll get to go up in that country and chase an animal like that with your bow. And then just the fact that, here in Colorado, it's our state animal. We do have a pretty good amount of them. We have some quality rams. And so just getting to see them and learn about them, and then going through the process that it takes to actually put a tag finally in your pocket was a big draw to me, to make sure that one day I got to hunt a Rocky Mountain bighorn.
Okay, so this process started 19 years ago, right? That's when you first put in to try to draw.
Yep.
When you did that, were you like, all right, someday I'm going to go do this? Or when you first put in, were you already imagining what it would be like?
I was always imagining what it would be like because, I love to read. And so I read every sheep book, sheep story, magazines, whatever. I read anything about sheep I could get my hands on. But in Colorado, your first 3 years that you apply for sheep, you cannot draw a sheep tag. Those are called your weighted points. You have to have 3 weighted points to get into the draw. Mm-hmm. After you have 3, there is a very small percentage chance that on your 4th year, you could pull a sheep tag. Now, some guys have. The miracle has happened, but it's super rare. Every year that you apply after that, I guess your name's in the hat just a little bit more. Yeah. But after 10 or 12 years, man, it honestly starts to feel like sheep tags aren't real.
Yeah. Can you just describe for me what it was like the moment that you found out that you had actually drawn?
I was sitting right here at my desk. I was answering some emails, and we knew, everybody in Colorado that puts in for sheep, mountain goat, knows the day the draw results come out. And all of a sudden, my email dinged, and I saw, my mountain goat results are on. And I clicked on it, and it was the typical, hey, thank you for your application in the Colorado draw system for mountain goat, unfortunately. And I just clicked off of it because I'm like, okay, there's another one. Yeah. And seconds later, the email dinged again, and I was like, oh, there's my sheep draw results. Time for another year of thanks for your application, man. And I literally clicked on it and confetti just shot up on the screen. Like CDOW had this deal where, it just goes, oof. First I was like, well, that's a sick joke to play on a guy. That's weird, because it didn't say anything. And then the email starts coming up and I'm scrolling down and I'm like, you're successful for unit S69 sheep. You're successful. And I'm like, then the panic, just sheer panic. I was like, wait a minute. So I got in my sheet booklet and I double and triple checked, like, please God, say I put in for the right unit. And this is, what if I put in for a U? And oh my gosh, wait, no, this unit only has Rams. And so my mind's going a million miles a minute. And so after I read the email from top to bottom about 6 times, double confirmed that everything was right, I just let out this yes. And I hit my desk, like I pounded on my desk. And my wife, she knows how accident prone I am. And she comes running in my office and she's like, did you fall? Is everything okay? And I was like, I just drew my Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep tag. And she's like, no, you didn't. I was like, yes, I did. And she's like, well, I guess there's no family vacations in August. And she's like, I'll start clearing my schedule because she knew the season. She's a saint. She was all in from the moment I found out. And then it was just first phone calls made to guys that I knew that were going to come on the sheep hunt. Some of my best friends in the world that I knew, like, no matter what they had going, this now becomes a huge priority. And my sheep hunt started that day. Whatever day in May that was, I can't remember the exact date, but that's the day my sheep hunt actually started because now you're holding a once in a lifetime tag and it's a 31-day season and you have a few months to get ready to go and you better make the most of every single day between now and then.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, all right, you've got this tag. You know that sheep tags do exist.
Yes, they're real.
But now it's on you to make it happen, you and your team, right? So tell me about what you started doing. What did you start doing to get ready for this hunt? But kind of more specifically, which I want to get to in detail, the archery shooting element of this. You've made a lot of shots on animals all through your career. We could argue that none of them are going to be more important than this shot that you're trying really hard to get. You've waited 19 years for it. So what do you start doing from a practice and training standpoint to make sure that you make this one shot count?
Yep. Well, luckily for me, I'm an ultra marathon runner. And so, I've run several 100-mile ultra runs in the mountains, a lot of 50 miles, marathons, just different things. So physically, I always try to keep myself in the best shape that I possibly can. So I was training for a 100-mile ultra going into this. And so I was like, man, shape wise, everything's set. What it came down to for me was spending that time really perfecting my shot process, my shot routine, mentally compartmentalizing what was going to have to take place, realizing that, hey, man, if you work really hard, you're going to probably get your one opportunity, but it's probably just going to be one. And the shot's probably not going to be at 35 yards on flat ground. It's just not going to be that way. You're probably going to be at a steep angle. It might be a little further than you think. The wind might be ripping. It was all about shooting preparation and what I'll call purposeful shooting preparation, and not just going out and writing down on the calendar that I shot 200 sticks of carbon that day. Every day had a purpose. I kept a shooting log, much like I keep a running log. And I spent days, full practice sessions working on nothing nothing but my grip, making sure that once I crawled into my 2-point anchor, that it was repeatable, that anchor was repeatable from flat ground, from distance, from up and down angles. And then, I spent a lot of days doing nothing but trusting my pin float on a blank target from 10 yards with no spots, dots, anything on it, and just going through the execution process of letting my release fire the bow. I shot in as much wind as I could get. And here in La Junta, Colorado, on the plains, I can get a lot of it. I learned my hold points. Every time I went on a sheep scouting mission, my target and bow were with me. In between, when we got sheep in the glass and guys were locked on them and things like that, I would carry my target uphill, very extreme angles. I would tote it downhill, and I would make shots with my buddies filming me, with my buddies, telling me in my ear that this is your once in a lifetime shot that you're about to make. I can't simulate it, and I knew that, but I wanted to be able to make that shot with people watching me. I wanted to be able to make that shot over and over and over and over again in my mind, and then execute it, because then the confidence starts to build.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. I want to go back a little bit to, how you broke down individual elements of the shot or your shooting, and would just dedicate a day's worth of practice session onto something like your grip. What does that actually mean? Like, every shot, are you just like analyzing your grip and being like, oh, that was good grip. Oh, that wasn't quite right. Like, what are you actually doing? Yep.
So the most important thing about a grip is that it's got to be repeatable and it's got to be consistent. If you shoot your bow a lot, when your grip's not right. And most of the time it won't happen when you're shooting on flat ground in your backyard.
Right.
It'll happen when you're shooting at 75 yards at a downhill angle, line of sight's 91, and you're bending at the waist. All of a sudden, something just doesn't feel right. Well, that's not the moment for something just not to feel right. So when I talk about practicing my grip, I would spend a full day sometimes just making sure that my grip was exact when I was pulling back on a downhill target or an uphill target or a flat target, that it always felt exactly the same, and that I was able to relax my bow arm from the elbow down, because when you can relax that bow arm from the elbow down, you're not squeezing the life out of that riser. A lot of times when you're shooting up or downhill angles, negative psyche things, that they'll jump into your mind. You'll start thinking, what if this bow jumps out of my hand? What if this, what if that? You got to have muscle memory and repetition that is done correctly will lead to that.
So on the mental side of it, how much do you think this game of like really perfecting, archery and bow hunting, like shooting specifically, how much of that do you think is mental?
All of it.
Yeah. 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
And people will say, no, there's some physical aspects to shooting a bow. And other than being able to hold that bow's weight up, and as long as you're not shooting a draw weight that you shouldn't be shooting because you feel like you need to be Hercules and pull 100 pounds, as long as you can hold a bow out in front and you can clip onto your D-loop and you can come to full draw and you can hold, that's the physical part of shooting a bow.
Yeah.
Everything else comes down to your mental focus and doing the things that you should do and not taking any shortcuts, whether you're shooting at a 25-yard deer or you're shooting at a 64.5-yard sheep. It doesn't matter. You should take that preparation and that attitude into every single hunt that you're going to go on. You should shoot like that every time you step out the door. Because there were days where I shot 5 arrows. I'm busy. I'm doing all the things I have to do. I have 3 kids. I have a wife. I help coach high school football. I run. I got all these different things going on. So some days it was a matter of stepping out the back door, standing at 65 to 80 yards and saying, okay, today it's 5 perfect arrows. And perfect doesn't mean, and I think people get hung up on that. Perfect doesn't mean that every one of those arrows were in the 12 ring on a 3D target or were in the 2-inch dot on my block target.
Yeah.
What perfect to me meant was I made the best shot that I possibly could for that arrow, whether the wind was blowing or it was hot or I wasn't feeling well or something wasn't off, whatever. For that arrow, it was the best shot that I could make.
Yeah. So, this mental game, there's some downfalls that people have on that side of it. Things like target panic, for example.
Sure.
You see really good archers, really good bow hunters regress at certain points in their career. So did you have anything like that while you were preparing for this? Were there any moments where you're like, oh my God, like I forgot how to shoot a bow?
I did, and it was just me being human. We're human beings and we can let our negative psyche take over a lot of times and we can give into that. I shoot a pure hinge. So I shoot a hinge release, which means I have to let my release fire the bow. If you punch a hinge, bye-bye to that arrow. You don't know where it's going to go. Yeah. I don't shoot an index finger and I don't shoot a thumb trigger. And I had some days, one day I was practicing and the wind was really blowing and I was shooting at some angles and man, I put an arrow square into the middle of a rock. The carbon just shattered, right? And it just blew up. And I was like, okay, that's all right. On to the next arrow. Next arrow. Didn't shatter it on the rock, but shot over the target. And it was a really bad day. I was up on the mountain sheep scouting, wasn't finding a lot of sheep, wasn't shooting worth a crap. And then all of a sudden I was like, man, I might have to manipulate this shot. Maybe I do better going back to my index finger, and if I go back to my index finger and the wind's blowing and I need to make it go, boy, I can make it go. I bet if I had an index finger there, it would have been a lot better. I bet. But in that instance, we're too prideful in some ways on some things. I called my archery coach, who's a great buddy of mine. I think every good archer should have a coach. And I mean, it's not a coach that I pay. It's not a coach that gives me lessons. It's just a great archer that, is there for those types of things. And I called him and I said, Yasti, man, I said, I had a bad day. And he's like, did you shoot the best you could? I was like, yeah, but I broke an arrow. I missed a target. And I'm thinking about, switching releases. He's like, yeah, that's a good idea. He's like, you're 3 weeks away from your sheep season. So let's redo everything. Let's grab an index finger and let's change your anchor point. Okay. Let's move your D loop. Let's retune your bow. Let's adjust that peep sight because now everything's not going to line up. Oh yeah. Let's build a new sight tape that you've spent 2 months working on down to the yard, to the half yard. And let's do that. At first, it made me mad. I was like, hey, being facetious and it's ticking me off. And then I get it. I was like, thanks, man. He's like, do I need to say anything else? And I was like, no, you don't. I was like, I got it. And that was it. From that point forward, I was like, stay true to what you know, stay true to what you've trained for. And it was a bad day. Tomorrow will be better. And I regrouped. The next day, the wind was ripping up there. And it was like shots were breaking. Arrows were where they were supposed to be. And it was just one of those deals where I made that I thought was a good shot, and it wasn't a good shot at the end of the day. Yeah. And I shattered an arrow, and that happens. I mean, that happens to everybody. So, yeah, I panicked a little bit for sure. It was 3 weeks out from the season, but, that phone call, set me straight. And after that, it was just full steam ahead. I've hunted with a lot of guys that have told me I've just got ice water in my veins when the animal steps out. And then it turns out that ice water might be a little lukewarm, when the animal steps out. Everybody gets excited. Everybody gets jacked up. When you see that animal and your one opportunity is about to present itself, it's completely normal for the heart rate to start to go up.
We'll be right back after the break. Through no small effort, Jace is able to get his shooting dialed in before the season. For the hunt itself, Jace calls in a group of his closest hunting buddies. A once-in-a-lifetime sheep hunt like this is really a team deal. And the plan is that Jace's crew will help him glass the area and find a huntable, mature ram. On the first day of the season, they're covered up in sheep. They have a couple close encounters, but Jace doesn't get a shot. They hunt hard for a second day, get the same result. Then, on day 3, Jace gets a radio message from his buddy Jason.
The radio kept crackling. It just would crackle, and we could hear Jason, and it was like we couldn't get him. So, 40 minutes went by, and all of a sudden he's like, does anybody have me now? And we're like, yeah, we can hear you. He's like, okay, you need to get service. I'm going to drop you a pin and you need to get over here right now. He's like, cause I took a drive after going into town. He's like, I've got 9 rams, 3 guaranteed shooters. He's like, I think it's the 3 big shooters we've been watching. You need to get over here. So it's like chasing tornadoes, man. I mean, it really is. It's like you go from this sheep to that sheep to this guy found sheep. So we pack everything up and we make the trek over there, get over there. And we're looking up on this mountainside and Jason's not there. Nature had called and he was over doing his thing. And Grafton's like, your buddy knows sheep. He's like, I've seen him glass sheep. He's like, but these things are not big sheep. He's like, I'm looking at them right now. He's like, Rick, these are junkers. He's like, we're not going up there after those sheep. He's like, you've passed bigger sheep than this. So we're all kind of like, okay. And then about that time, Jason comes walking over there and he's like, you got him? And nobody wants to be rude, right? We're always,
right.
oh, yeah, man, we got him. And he's like, no, not those little scrappers. He's like, the big ones. And so we just had focused solely on those. And there was 3 stud rams. It was the biggest 3 rams in the unit. I mean, I put glass on them 100 times over the summer, and they were bedded basically under a sheer rock cliff. Just, that was it. There was no approach from the bottom because of the wind. So what we did is we took our mapping system and everybody marked the spot. We believed the sheep were the best that we could. We triangulated everything. And then I took my smartphone out and I started taking pictures of that rock. And there was one tree on that rock that I really wanted to get a picture of because I figured from any approach that I had, I would be able to distinguish and find that tree. And I knew if I could find that tree, I could at least put myself in a position where I wouldn't have to rely on them anymore, telling me anything on the radio. Like, okay, I got it. So I made a big 2-mile loop, came in across the top, cut through some timber, and finally got to that tree. It was a process. I had to cross quite a few drainages, canyons, everything like that. But I got to this tree, kind of came around it, and bedded on a massive boulder is this ram. And he's just beautiful, the most awesome thing you've ever seen. And he's not a shooter ram, but he's just bedded there. Yeah. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so freaking cool. He's 96 yards and he's licking his hooves. He's just totally content. I cannot see any other sheep. Yeah. But I knew they were there. So I walked back about 50 yards. I just got on the radio and I said, guys, I'm in position. No more radio communication. I have them and I'm going dark and we're done. So I just turned it off. Got back over there, sheep's in the same spot, and I couldn't do anything because he had visual everywhere. People say, sheep don't really look up. No, sheep look up. This sheep liked to look up.
He was looking up, yeah.
And he's looking everywhere below him. And then every once in a while I'd see, some of the younger rams, those 3 younger rams, they'd get in and feed below him on the grasses and stuff. And my only hope was to stay exactly where I was and hope that the bigger rams, I had a feeling, were bedded somewhere between where I was, but I couldn't see that angle in those rams. Mm-hmm. And after an hour and a half, that ram gets up, he jumps off the rock, and as soon as he does, those 3 rams stand up. Mm-hmm. And they're literally right below me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, they're right below me. And they started working across the rock face. I ranged the spot that I knew that, man, this is where I need to take the shot. It was 64.5 yards. I dialed my side tape up. I was able to stand because at this point they're walking. They have no idea. And drew my bow back, leaned out over the cliff, which had I fallen, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
What was the angle, downward angle?
It was greater than 40.
Greater than 40.
Greater than 40, yeah. Line of sight was 80-some yards probably, but with angle compensation, and that's so important to make sure, that was all the practice and knowing that I could trust that loophole rangefinder down to the 10th of a yard, gave me 64.5 yards.
So let's just slow down on a second on that for folks who are not familiar with shooting at these angles. So the line of sight from you to the ram is 81 yards. So that's how far the arrow is actually traveling, but your hold on that ram is a distance of
64.5.
64.5. Okay.
Yep.
There's some basic math going into the shot that is compensated for by a rangefinder, which gives you the proper readouts. Okay.
Yeah. Thank God for technology because I failed math. So I needed to know that number. And when the ram that I wanted to shoot, I mean, there was no doubt for me which one he was. And he stepped clear. He was the lead ram. And that's something, when they start to travel, usually the shooter ram, the biggest ram in the group, the most mature ram in the group, usually leads the group. And they got to a little bush and there's a little screen field. And I was 64.5 yards. I was at full draw. Everything felt good. I was terrified out of my mind. I was extremely nervous, but when the shot broke, everything felt right. I heard that wonderful sound you like to hear. It was a very distinct, but there was no reaction from him whatsoever.
Let's rewind a little bit back to the shot itself. Like, what about it do you remember? Besides like the details of, distance, angle, wind, those things, like what was the feeling, and do you remember seeing the arrow in flight? Like what were the details that you can recall of the actual shot?
Yeah, I remember picking my spot on the sheep. I remember letting my pin float right there on that spot. And I remember in my mind thinking, please God, go off now, because I'm shooting a hinge. And I'm like, I knew it was there.
Explain that for a second. Like, what's the mechanism and why were you feeling that way?
So an index or a thumb, they both have a trigger, right? They can be manually, shouldn't be, but can be manually depressed anytime you want that arrow to go. When you want the arrow to go on an index finger, it's just like a rifle trigger. Boom, it goes. Thumb is no different. It's just depressed with the thumb.
Right. With
a hinge, you have a sear. You have a sear system inside, and that sear is set at a certain, basically it's a certain hot, cold tension.
Yeah.
And I shoot my releases a little colder than most because I really want to have time to make sure that my pin is floating in an area. And then as I'm driving forward with my bow arm into that riser and staying strong in the front, strong in the back, keeping my anchor up and pulling into the shot, that is what makes that hinge
That's
fire.
What fires the, yeah. Okay. So you're at full draw on this ram. You're like, God, please let please let the bow go off at this point, because you've got the pin there. And then what? And then what happened?
Yep. And I remember thinking that, and then it was just, and then when you shoot a hinge correctly, you almost just kind of break apart.
Yeah.
You know, the bow arm goes forward. The bow for me falls, drives off to the left, and then the arm drops back. And I didn't see the arrow in flight. I remember not seeing the arrow in flight 100%, but I heard a distinct plop. I heard the sound you want to hear when diaphragm gets popped by a broadhead arrow combo. I heard that sound. But when the sheep didn't react, I was like, wait, did I shoot under him? That grass swallowed it and made the same noise. That grass swallowed it. And before I know it, I'm loading another arrow. But by then, those other rams picked them up, and then they went across that street field. And it ended up being that the shot was, it was a 12. I mean, it was perfect. I mean, it went in the high side lung and dropped out low on the offside lung, complete pass through, double lung shot. The hemorrhaging was massive and the death was super quick. I do remember when I went to hook my hinge onto my D-loop, I missed.
Wow.
So people that say like, I don't get nervous, I missed. I completely, and I had to look at my hand, and I remember saying to myself like, hey, let's go get it together here. Come on.
So it's not like you weren't nervous or you weren't anxious. You had just practiced enough that you could still be nervous and still shoot.
That's the thing that I want more than anything. I just want people to understand with archery, because I love it so much. I love bow hunting, and I want everybody to do it. I wish everybody did it. If I had it my way, that everybody would shoot a bow. But a lot of people start and they quit, one, because it's hard, and two, because it can become really an anxious game.
Yeah.
And that takes the fun away. Nobody likes to feel anxious. Anxiety is a horrible feeling. And we're seeing that across the board with everything that's going on right now. There's more anxiety issues probably than ever, right? But
absolutely.
But right now, shooting a bow should be a release from that. That should be your time away. And even though, I was terrified of what was just about to transpire, but I had confidence in my system, not my body system, in my shot system. I had confidence that I had everything that I could. And all I told myself was one good arrow. That's all we have to do here is one good arrow. It's supposed to be fun. Get clipped on your D-loop here. Let's act like we've been here before, and you're going to shoot. You've done it. So do the best job that you can. And I had so much confidence in my gear. I had so much confidence in my shot process. I knew going along, and throughout the hunt, man, there was days during lunch and stuff like that where I had a target with me all the time. If we were by the trucks, I had a target, and I was shooting. I was shooting, and I was shooting, and I was shooting, because I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure every day that I worked so hard for that one opportunity, and it just ended up working out. It was a great feeling. I mean, it was a great feeling.
Are you an anxious person just in your regular life? Do you experience any of that stuff?
Yes. Yeah, I definitely am, and that's not something I'm ashamed to admit or ashamed to tell anybody. Everybody always asks me, well, why'd you start writing? Why do you do video stuff and things like that? It's not to promote me. I really don't care. I want everybody to have the same joy that I've gotten out of archery. And I want everybody to understand that, like, everybody's human. Nobody has this perfect cookie cutter life that we see on social media. I mean, I go through struggles and anxiousness every day. Little things make me extremely anxious. And I've always been a very worrywart, very anxious person. Bow hunting, it's actually helped me because it gives me such a, through bow hunting and ultra running, it gives me a purpose, it gives me goals to center on. So don't think if you're a super anxious person or if you have ADHD or you're hyperactive or any of those things that you can't be a good bow hunter, or that this sport might not be for you, because man, everybody has struggles, and it's just a matter of finding a way to get through them and not pretending that those types of things aren't real and stuff like that. Because like I said, man, before that shot, I could sit here right now and lie to you and tell you, oh no, man, it was autopilot and I had no worries, and it was autopilot, but it's just because I prepared for it.
Without going to like psychoanalysis here, but do you think that could be, one of the elements that really like draws you to bow hunting, is that it allows you to have these high anxiety, high stress moments, but be successful in them? Because you're able to train for them, and that over the years you've like really had the discipline to be successful in these moments that you've kind of create for yourself. No one made you go sheep hunting. No one made you feel anxious. You decided to take on that for yourself. You decided to put yourself in that moment, and ultimately it was your training and your discipline that allowed you to be successful in that moment.
Yeah. And I think that's what's helped me so much in life is bow hunting is a huge part of who I am. And that has helped me, because a lot of times when I'm bow hunting, I'm not comfortable. Yeah. I'm not in my comfort zone. It's really hard for me to be away from my family. I'm not one of those guys that goes 10 days into the backcountry and can check out mentally and forget about everything. I'm worried about deadlines. I'm worried about, the editor's notes that I missed, what I don't get paid, and, running my own business and kids in sports. And what if I miss a game and they're hurt? All those things bring me a great deal of worry and anxiety, and they're always in the back of my mind. But when you're out there and you learn to compartmentalize and you learn to deal with those things. And I've had a lot of people, because I'm not afraid to ask, help me with those things. Yeah. Like when I'm struggling with that stuff, I just call my wife, and I don't pretend to be tough. And like, I'll be like, honey, I miss you so much. I think I need to come home. Yeah. And if somebody hears that and they're like, oh my gosh, that's fine. Yeah. But I do. I'll call my wife and I'll call my kids from the top of a mountain and say, hey, it's day 3 of this elk hunt. I know we have it slated for 10, but I'm thinking about cashing it in because I miss you guys too much. There's too much going on. And then my wife's like, no, this is what you do. This is what we do. We've prepared for this as a family. You're fine. I got this. The kids are fine. You're fine. Everything's fine. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Everything is fine. Yeah. It's just like when I had the meltdown with my bow. I called somebody. Right. I called somebody that I knew could help. Right. Because we can't be such a prideful, as men, we're very prideful. Men, we're very prideful. We can fix it. We'll get it. We'll all take care of it. I'll do it. I get that to an extent, but also, if there's somebody out there that can help you, or there's somebody out there that you can learn from, or there's somebody that you're like, man, I like what he does. I want to spend time. Reach out to him. Spend time around them. Don't be afraid to admit your shortcomings. Don't be afraid to talk to people, man. You can't just live in your own little bubble and feel like everything's going to be okay. You have to step outside your comfort zone.
There's the blood trail right there. I can't even talk. Look where he just poured it. Look at this. They're just shooting it out. I've dreamed of that since I was just a little kid. If you look right there, that is a Rocky Mountain bighorn.
So after making the shot, Jace takes a minute to collect himself. Then he makes his way down to his ram. His buddies, who have been watching all this play out through spotting scopes, make their climb up to meet him.
100 pounds had just been lifted off my shoulders. I was relieved. I was elated. I was thrilled that it was so quick and it was over for that ram in 20 seconds, that he didn't really know what happened, and that I could just sit up there and enjoy that moment. And then when I finally started to walk down, I just started crying. People will say, well, that I was so overcome with emotion that it was just tears pouring down my face, because I worked really hard for it. We all did. We all worked really hard for that moment, and it all finally came together. And I was super honored to be up there in that country, to be with those guys, to make a good shot, to let everything come together. And it was just really special, man. It was super cool.
Do you think the emotion came from just like kind of all that build up anxiety, and then it's just released and it kind of comes out? It just comes out as tears because that's just the strongest reaction we have as humans.
Yeah. Yes. That's exactly what it was. I mean, it wasn't like this tear, like fist thumping, like, it was just that of like sheer thankfulness and sheer relief.
The Outdoor Life podcast is edited and produced by our senior deputy editor, Natalie Krebs. It's hosted by me, editor-in-chief Alex Robinson. Music in this episode was composed and performed by Tandis Jenhudson, plus Federico, Coderoni, and company.